A special thank you to today's sponsor, Private Internet Access VPN. It's been building since spring of 2020, but it looks like it's finally official. Tesla is moving its headquarters to Texas. What are the consequences? Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So I wasn't really planning on doing an episode like another one today because I already did one this morning, and if you haven't caught it, you should watch it. It's very good. But yesterday, Tesla officially announced that they are moving their headquarters to Texas from Los Angeles, California, which LA was a little bit of a weird spot anyway, since all of their factories and everything were in Fremont, and their AI work and everything is in Palo Alto. So it was kind of weird that it was in LA, but it was just because of where they started and all. But anyway, they were in California. They were firmly a California company until the whole pandemic happened, and a lot of conflict happened in California, especially with government officials, and that made Elon Musk rather angry. And you don't really want to piss off somebody like Elon Musk, because he will actually take up stakes and move someplace else, which is exactly what he's done. So I just wanted to do a quick episode really briefly to discuss the fact that Tesla is actually moving, and it's a really big deal. And for those of you outside the United States, you may think like, well, moving from one district to another is not that big a deal, but the states in the US are pretty separate from each other. Obviously, you can travel between them and all of that sort of stuff. But each state pretty much sets its own business rules, its own social rules, its own economic rules in terms of taxes and things like that. So moving from one state to another has a really big impact on a company. California is a very difficult state for businesses to run in because they have a really high tax rate, and they also have a lot of restrictions on businesses and the way they operate. So Texas is very much the opposite end of the spectrum. It's kind of laissez-faire, do whatever the heck you want to. So, it's obviously going to be less expensive for Tesla to run its business out of Texas, and it will also allow them to do things faster. You can see that Giga Texas, the factory, was started substantially later than Giga Berlin. If I'm remembering, it was 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, something like that. I don't remember the exact number. But anyway, it was a long time after Giga Berlin, but already Giga Texas is, right on track with Berlin in terms of when they're going to open. So clearly Texas has kind of like, just rolled out the red carpet and said, do whatever the heck you want to, Tesla. So anyway, that's the consequence for Tesla. It should be much easier for them to run their business out of Texas rather than California. The consequent interesting question is, what happens to California and what happens to Texas? Well, California loses a great deal. Immediately, they're not going to lose that much because Tesla's headquarters and where they are isn't going to affect things. They still have their factory in Fremont. They still have their AI division in Palo Alto, and I think they still have something in LA. I'm not sure exactly what they have left in LA. But anyway, they've got a lot of manufacturing and everything that's still going on in California. So there won't be quite the immediate effect. Of course, a year and a half ago when they started Giga Texas construction, well, obviously they were going to put a factory someplace outside of California anyway. So none of these consequences are immediate, but over time, the fact that Tesla will probably become the largest company in the world by market cap is going to have a major impact on California. The fact that they are not getting the tax revenue, they're also not getting the sort of reputation boost that having a company like California would give them as well. So I think long term, it is going to be very, very detrimental to California, although it will take years for that to play out. It won't be one of those immediate things where you see, and also California, I think, is the 6th largest economy in the world. So, they have enough other stuff going on that it's not going to have an immediate and massively devastating effect. But it is going to have an effect over time not having Tesla there. And it's going to also put a chill on other companies like them considering moving to California. So it will have a chill, kind of a knock-on effect that will happen over time. So I think it's a bigger deal for California than a lot of people are giving credit to. And, the folks in California should actually have tried an awful lot harder to have kept Tesla there. But obviously they didn't, and they don't particularly care. So that's the consequences for California. More on this in a minute, but first, hey y'all, I'd like to take a minute to talk to you about Private Internet Access VPN, which is the sponsor for today's video. A VPN is all about privacy, security, and freedom, and Private Internet Access VPN is the best at all of these. If you don't want government entities or commercial entities snooping around your stuff, then you definitely want VPN, and PIA VPN is the best at this. They use open source software, so that means that everything's being examined by the open source community constantly, and so their security is at the very top of the game. You also want security for your data and for your browsing history. And private internet access VPN never uses logs. They don't keep any logs of your access or anything that you've done. And this has been held up in court, so that's amazing. And finally, we all want freedom. We want to be able to access data when we want it and where we want it. And private internet access VPN gives you access to VPN servers all around the globe. So you can basically be in Canada or Europe or South Korea or anywhere else you'd like to be, all while using private internet access VPN. And this gives you the ability to download content that you might not be able to get in your own home territory, and that's amazing. So with the best privacy through open source software, the best security, and the best freedom to access content anywhere you want, anytime you want, private internet access VPN is the best. Check out the link in the description and see how you can save up to 83%. Heck, it ends up being less than a cup of coffee per month to protect your privacy, your security, and your freedom. What could be better? So what are the consequences for Texas? Well, that is a really interesting question. Certainly Texas is a really, really big state, and it's also quite wealthy, and it's wealthy because of oil revenue. So that is a really interesting little factor there, right? In fact, I know for a fact, because I have colleagues that work at Texas universities, that they have just a much higher endowment level, just in terms of the state schools have a generally higher amount of money from the state because of oil revenue. Oil revenue is really interesting because, of course, it goes up and down drastically. In 2020, during the pandemic, it bottomed out, and so the amount of revenue kind of disappeared. It's come back up again in gangbusters over time. But number one, Texas doesn't have nearly as much oil as it used to, of course. And by the way, the thumbnail that I did is the Beverly Hillbillies. I actually did the thumbnail before I did the episode because I thought the thumbnail was so funny. And I know it's backwards, it's Texas people moving to California, but I thought it was darn funny. And I just put a Tesla logo on their, beat up jalopy, and I thought it was pretty darn funny. So anyway, don't get mad at me about the fact that it's backwards because they're going from Texas to California, but I just thought it was funny, so whatever. That's my own zany sense of humor. So if you think of something better, maybe I should have had Knight Rider and had Kit driving into Texas or something instead. I don't know. But anyway, that was the idea for the thumbnail. But the upshot here is that you've got an EV new energy company that's coming into Texas that has traditionally been, all of their wealth or most of their wealth has come out of the oil mining and refining type of industry, right? So Houston and Dallas is a really big banking center now and everything. So, it's a very diversified economy, of course, because it's a very large state, but it is kind of at its heart an oil state. So it's really interesting that you've got this massive EV company coming in, and it's not just cars, right? But Tesla as a whole sells solar roofs and power walls and things like that. So all of this is moving away from combustion, which is again what I talked about just this morning in the episode that I did. And then the second aspect about Texas is an extremely conservative state in terms of somewhat fiscal. I don't know. I never feel like conservatives really kind of go the whole hog with fiscal responsibility. It doesn't seem to go that way, but they are pretty laissez-faire in terms of that. But what I mean more importantly is socially conservative. And there are a number of issues, and I'm going to try to keep the politics as low as possible, but it's important to talk about in this context. So let's just say there are a number of social issues that are going on right now in Texas, and you can Google those if you want to, and you can find out for yourself. But Tesla is, a California kind of liberal West Coast company at heart, and it's moving to Texas. So Austin itself, of course, is sort of like Athens. Well, Athens, Georgia is sort of like Austin, Texas. I guess that's a better way of putting it. But I call us the blue dot in the big red sea, right? So we're in Georgia, and there's a little blue dot for Athens and a big blue dot for Atlanta, and the rest of the whole state is red. And Texas is kind of the same way. Austin is the blue dot in the middle of the giant red state. So I think that Tesla itself will be fairly comfortable in the Austin area because Austin is weird and it's kind of funky and it's fun and all. But the bigger question is they've also got SpaceX now, which is another sort of, transplant from a West Coast type of company into the Texas area. And that's in Brownsville, which is by no means a liberal area of the state or the country. So that has an interesting effect. And so what you've got this point sort of, west of Houston in the middle of the state, more or less. And then you've got this other point kind of in the southeastern part of the state. And both of those together are going to start to have some sort of social impact. It's not just the companies themselves, but it's all of the Halo workers that are going to be coming with them and their families and the kids going to school. So it's going to start to have a social impact on the state. And I don't know if Texas is really has thought this through yet, right? Because the government is actually in Austin, interestingly enough, but it's a very, very socially conservative government. And so I am curious to find out what is going to happen? You know, right now Tesla's being welcomed with open arms, but there are going to be changes in the societal structure of Texas itself that will happen due to the fact that Tesla is there. And that's going to be an interesting thing to see play out. So anyway, in the short term, I'm thinking real good for Tesla because, of course, it's going to help their financial situation because there aren't as many taxes, there's not as many restrictions, so they can build a little more aggressively and they can build out what they're doing, and along with SpaceX as well, which has moved a big part of their business into the Texas area. As far as California is concerned, it's not going to have a huge immediate effect, but there will be an effect over time, and it's going to be a negative effect. And it's not just financial, but it's also reputational, right? Because having Tesla in California was a big reputation builder, and California kind of screwed the pooch and blew it on that whole thing. So anyway, and then of course, in terms of Texas, Texas is going to have a huge financial improvement because you've got this EV company coming in with a lot of money. So that's very helpful. Also, I totally forgot to mention earlier, but Texas, I believe, still doesn't allow EVs to be sold directly to consumers. So I still think they have this weird situation that when they open Giga Texas, they're going to have to ship the cars to another state like Oklahoma or Louisiana or something like that. You're gonna have to purchase them there and then drive them back into Texas, which is an utterly ridiculous situation. So I expect hopefully that will change relatively soon. But in addition to that, the social conservatism of the state itself is going to have a really interesting, you know, there's going to be a bit of a push-pull over the coming years. Again, this is not something that's going to happen immediately. And as I said, Austin itself is very, very friendly to weird liberal kind of West Coast ideas. But the state itself is a whole different matter. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over, let's say, the next 3 to 5 years in terms of some societal stress between the kind of newer, younger, liberal-ish kind of social ideas and the older, more conservative ones. And of course, the sort of oil barren, oil-rich idea, the basis of Texas. You know, that really is. You think of Texas, you think of oil wells and stuff, right? And the tension between that and a green EV new company is going to be really interesting to see play out as well. So I think it's going to be really fun to watch all of this happen. I don't know, there could be some people in Texas who are not going to enjoy this so much, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out. So anyway, I just wanted to do this episode quick and just sort of throw out these ideas and see what you have to say about that. Definitely let me know in the comments what you think. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, please do like it so other people can find it, and consider subscribing for more of this. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much. There's been some discussion along these lines today, and I still am going to do one on Germany as well. I'm sort of waiting for some things to line up in place, but I'm going to do something on Tesla and Germany soon. And that has a lot to do with one of my Patreon patrons, so thank you so much. And of course, if you want to join the fun, definitely check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in some awesome merch, check out the link in the description. We've got the TeslaBot t-shirt, which is super popular these days. Don't mess with Tesla. Lots of other t-shirts, tumblers, mugs, etc. So check out the link in the description and help the channel out. And once again, thank you to Private Internet Access VPN for sponsoring today's video. And as always, feel free to ask me questions in the comments or at my email address, which is drknowitallknows@gmail.com. Till next time, bye-bye.